welcome back. What an honor it is for me and Coach Patterson to have our first ever guest on the podcast. It's not about me. He's a dear friend of both of ours. I'm fortunate to call him a brother. He's a best-selling writer. The book, Always by My Side, New York Times bestseller about his dad and his fight with Alzheimer's. Numerous Emmy Awards, numerous Hall of Fames, including the NBA and the NFL Hall of Fame. And as we know, Gary, one of the great guys we've ever been around and got to meet. Our first ever guest on our podcast as we start this journey, the great, legendary Jim Nantz.
Oh, yeah. All you have to do is hear his voice, and everybody already knows. Hey, Jim Nantz is on the show. I mean, they don't even need to see his face. He's so...
Yeah, he's great. Matter of fact, Jimmy, give us the call.
Hello, friends.
There you go.
Good to be with you guys.
That's
what
awesome.
An honor. Seriously, you're both wonderful friends. And Lance, you know, the world doesn't know it, but we know how close we are. It is brotherhood. And the only other thing that could pop in my mind when I heard I was the first guest is that one of my sneaky favorite honors of my life is being the last guest on How I Met Your Mother. So this is up there in that stratosphere. I was the last guest on the final show, the series finale. That was meaningful to me. I've never told anybody that, and this is too, to now be on the other side of it, the first guest on It's Not About Me.
Well, I hope we're as successful as How I Met Your Mother, because that was a great show. I remember a story you told Chuck Lorre that, you know, they should take How I Met Your Mother and move it up to a better and get rid of, 2.5 Men. And Chuck Lorre said, well, that's also my show too, Jim. Yeah, I remember that story.
It was a major faux pas on my part. I took my daughter Caroline out to California because I had a special opportunity through a producer, you knew him, Brian Hall, to go see a taping of Hannah Montana. And after that, we were going over to the set as Chuck Lorre's guest, and I was saying, boy, this show is so much better than 2.5 Men. I mean, what is CBS thinking, having you guys at 9:30 and that old stale show at 9 o'clock? And he looked at me and said, you know, that is my show also. It's like, whoops. Yeah, one of those things you'd like to have back. Happens all the time.
Well, Jimmy, speaking of that, let's just start with that. You know, Caroline was a young lady back then. Now she's married. And, you know, I wasn't going to bring this up until later, but last weekend you had a great moment with Caroline and Jameson, your other daughter. Tell us what you did last weekend.
I went to Indianapolis to become a full-fledged Swiftie, to join the ranks, Coach. I went to see Taylor Swift. I got to take my 2 daughters, Caroline and my little Finley, and my first cousin, Allie Nance Bueller, who's in stage 4 cancer and doing great. But it was just pure magic to be there as a dad and seeing them, knowing the lyrics to all 47 songs and dancing. And it truly was one of my favorite nights of all time.
That's awesome.
Go ahead, Coach.
Oh, no, I mean, were you also singing, dancing? Or is it just you were watching them singing and dancing?
Hey, I had some moves there, and when I would move a little bit, my little 10-year-old said, Dad, stop, you're embarrassing me. So it's funny, I was on the floor. We had, gratefully, we had good seats, and right over my head was the banner for the Colts Super Bowl season of 2006, which Lance produced the Super Bowl. I was fortunate enough there to be calling it. And that's when they beat Chicago down in Miami. And I was looking up there and thinking, man, I've been in this building so many times for Colts games, meaningful playoff games, NCAA tournament Final Fours and championship games. And wow, I was there for that. But you know what? This means more to me. I'm having a daddy-daughter night, and it was just very special. She is an amazing performer. And I didn't know all the songs, but every one that I heard, they were all great. And she is some performer. You know, it's funny, the Colts quarterback couple of weeks ago took himself out of the game. You saw that probably, Coach Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
He said he was tired. He admitted later that he was tired. It led to his being benched. And it did dawn on me as I was sitting on the floor on the home of the Colts, at the home of the Colts, that here was a performer running around for 3.5 hours without a break, hitting every lyric, every dance step. There's intensity in this show. And it's not like coming out of the pocket or scrambling for 20 yards. I hate to compare different genres, but her athleticism, being able to do that show, do it the next night. She had a 3-night sequence there. I was in awe of just the efforting of what went on there. It was magic. And I've, like you guys, we've all seen, the Springsteens and whatever it might be, the Rolling Stones. This would be the greatest show I've ever seen. It's not really a concert as much as it is like a theatrical production. Every song kind of has its own set and movement and visuals. It's really well done. And that was the last show in the U.S. It was in Indianapolis.
You'd really want to know, Jim, how many hours it took her to train to be able to do that 3-hour show. We all know. And the second part is, were you able to tell your daughters that she knew her boyfriend?
Oh, yeah, they know that. Yeah, Gary, they know that. They were so bummed the night we were there, he was not there. We missed him by a night. He did fly in, which, listen, I know that goes against a lot of conventional thinking that, what was it, 2 nights before a football game, and he jets off to sea. But, hey, it was her last U.S. stop, and what did he come back with, 100-yard game Monday night and 12 catches,
yeah.
So it certainly didn't hurt anybody. And I do get to deal with Travis quite a bit because of our AFC allegiance as the AFC network. He's a wonderful guy, and Lance knows. He's had a lot of sit-down meetings, and Coach, I'm sure you've dealt with Travis. I really do enjoy being around him, and it's a lot, man. I'm telling you, there's a lot going on in his life. To be a football star, to be married to the most successful entertainer of this generation. I mean, the show is so big. He's living in a very big world right now.
Well, the other amazing thing, she was at the game on Monday night.
Yeah, she flipped around and after 3 straight shows, she came to Kansas City and was there to support him, which is pretty cool to see them supporting one another like that.
A lot of people have asked me if I was still doing games, the number 1 game at CBS, what I would do about Taylor Swift. And I said, right off the bat, I'd probably fight it. But then you read and you see what it's done, not only to the NFL and viewerships, but fathers, daughters coming together, sitting down, watching the game because they want to take a chance of seeing Taylor Swift at the football game. I mean, you're, like you said, you're a girl's dad. I mean, it's got to be pretty amazing what you've seen through what she's done and what she's brought to the NFL.
Well, it's undeniable that there is an audience that is waiting around to see if they show a cutaway of her. Now, Mike Arnold, who sat next to you all those years, a great and legendary director, really kind of falls on a director to make that judgment in a split second. Travis makes a catch, boom, cut to her, 3 seconds later, cut out of it. It's not like total on-air time is 10 minutes out of the 3 hours. If you add it up, it could be 9 cutaways that totals 46 seconds over the span of 4 quarters. And that's kind of what it is. And hey, listen, I'm in Nashville. I have a home here and a home in California, but she lives, when she's ever in Nashville, right in this general area. I've never crossed paths, but I've gotten to know her dad a little bit through a lot of texting, including this last weekend. We've been texting for the last year. He's a proud dad. I mean, he should be. Pretty amazing how this family has come together and created this megastar.
Never thought, Coach, would be our first few minutes on this with Jim Nantz talking about Taylor Swift. But I knew that he went with his daughter. My daughter, Katie, called me about something else this morning and wished us luck on our first podcast. and she was saying, "Hey, by the way, do you know that Jim went to Taylor Swift concert with, and my daughters are very close to Caroline, his oldest daughter, and I said, yeah, I heard that story. So I didn't mean to go down that road, but since he brought up that was great.
You're now a Swiftie.
Yeah, that's right. Just if I may, you're doing this show. It's going to be great. The magic of it all is if you really want to get a lot of clicks, change the name of the show from "It's Not About Me" to "It's All About Taylor Swift." You will not believe the audience reach you will get.
Yeah. I think she might have a little problem with these two guys. Like, who are these two guys? Put my name out there. Jimmy. Coach Patterson. I was talking to him about this morning. People don't realize, they think that you and Tony Romo and Tracy Wilson and Jim Rickoff and Mike Arnold, the producer director, and all the other people, the 150, 200 men and women that will come to a football game on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, they don't realize the amount of work that goes into preparing for a game. Like this weekend, you have Dallas and Philadelphia, the late game, which is actually the most watched game and the most watched TV show of the week on television. Starting after your game last Sunday to the end of the Dallas-Philadelphia game, walk us through your week, getting prepared for that game, your what you want to say personally, what you do during the week on, just yourself as someone, like all of us have, you don't have a 9-to-5 job. And I think people don't understand the amount of work that you put through getting ready for the game, and then also what's your requirement as just a normal citizen.
Well, first off, there are no 2 weeks that are alike. And I'm a guy that likes to stay busy. So it's more than just the games. I have things on the outsides, some businesses and very meaningful charity cause and research center that takes a fair amount of my time. And, you use the word work. The work, I never really consider it work. Coach, it would be like, in your brilliant career, when you were on a Tuesday, you didn't call it work. You loved it. It was prep. It was practice. Yeah. It was all part of the process. And that's what really it is for me, is it's processing of just everything leading up to Sunday. And I enjoy the process. Some weeks, for whatever reason, get a little bit more busy and a little harder to steal away that needed 2 hours a day, at least, reading to stay on top of the league, make sure you've got the latest things going with the two teams that are going to be in front of you on Sunday. But okay, here, I'll pull it up. So like today, I have the honor of being on your show, and I'm going to go from here and be laying down some commercials. I'll be in a studio down on Music Row here in Nashville. And then after that, I'm meeting with some Nashville city councilmen. I'm wanting to get involved in a development, the redevelopment of a golf course here in the inner city called Ted Rhodes Golf Course. Ted Rhodes was a black golfer who never had the chance to play on the PGA Tour. He was from Nashville. There's a course named after him here in our city. And I think that course deserves to have some love and be renovated and rebuilt and shine a light on it and his story. With Lance, when you produced the 1997 Masters, it was won by Tiger, and I was sitting in Butler Cabin for one of the biggest moments of our careers. I asked Tiger about the significance of his win. He mentioned Ted Rhodes in his very first answer. So I'm making a pitch today to a group, including the Tennessee Golf Foundation, actually collaborating on how we can all come together and do something very special here for our city and for the legacy of Ted Rhodes. So that's kind of today. And later in the week, I'll be getting into Texas to get ready for the Cowboy game. And I'm going to visit with my dear friends, President and Mrs. Bush, down in Crawford. He's going to have a Wounded Warrior event taking place. He's extremely dedicated and loyal to that cause. And shining a light on them and giving them funding to do things that sometimes are not filtered down through the federal process of government spending and blah blah blah. But he's really truly a great friend to the veterans, and we're going to watch a mountain bike race, and I get to stay overnight and have dinner, and it'll be fun. Right in the middle. It's a little odd, right in the middle of a weekend when you're off on a city, really locked in on a game, but it was something I'm really honored to be asked to come down and spend some time with them. But I'll be back on Saturday and ready to meet with the Eagles and ready to do our game on Sunday, and hopefully it'll be a good one. It's got some missing pieces with no Dak Prescott. He's going to be out, and Cowboys, of course, are in a desperate mode right now. It seems to be falling apart. Maybe they can turn it around in one snap of a finger with Cooper Rush coming in. Who knows what's going to happen? Certainly, I'm not blaming Dak, but yeah, it's an exciting life we lead. You both know what I'm talking about. You both lead very exciting lives. It's not normal what any of us have done. We're grateful to be given the opportunity to do what we always wanted to do, to chase a dream, and whether it's to be winning the biggest games and bowl games there are in the sport, or producing the Masters and the Super Bowl. I'm grateful. So bring it on.
Yeah, I've never said, and Coach, you'd have to say the same thing. People ask me about working. I said, I've never worked a day in my life. My life has been one big recess. We all got to do what, as a kid, that we wanted to do. And how many people are able to say that? I know you, Jimmy, you were a kid in high school, even younger, that this is what your goal was. And talk about that. How did you know this is what you wanted to do?
I just was smitten, enchanted by the voices of my youth. And I just wanted to be one of those voices. It didn't have anything to do with wanting to be on television. I wanted to be just like Jim McKay, Jack Whitaker, Pat Summerall, Dick Enberg, Chris Schenkel. The list, Kurt Gowdy, the list can go on for quite a while. They were my friends. This is an age of when I was growing up. There was you had the 3 network affiliates and an independent station. You had no sports coverage during the week. You waited till the weekend to be taken somewhere around the world where sports would take you. And these voices, take Jim McKay, for example, became our tour guides. It introduced us to these faraway places. And I just was completely mesmerized by that idea that I could travel like that and see these sporting events and meet interesting and fascinating people. And that was the hook for me. So these men I mentioned, got to know them all, got to really know them, some of them really well. I wrote them letters as a kid, fan mail, and I did hear back from Jim McKay. He was the one who did write me back. And that began a process of becoming, not pen pals, that's too strong and misleading, but once a year or so, I would know it's time to check in with Jim McKay and write a piece of fan mail, and I'd get a note back. It was insane. So when I graduated from college, from Houston, within a couple of days, an intermediary and dear friend Paul Marchand was a golf pro up at the Connecticut Golf Club, and McKay was a member there. And of course, Paul knew all through college how much I admired and worshiped Jim McKay, and he brokered a graduation gift, come up to Connecticut and play a round of golf with Jim McKay. And that I did. And that then took our relationship, our friendship, to a whole new level. I got to meet the great man. He was a little guy, like 5'5", with a great voice, worldly knowledge. And when I got to CBS 4 years later, he was championing me all the while. So funny twist, Coach. You write somebody as a young boy, you want to be just like him. You tell him that. You go to his last show, the 2000 Open Championship at St. Andrews, to be there to walk him to the tower for his last show. I'm backstage with Pavarotti before the last concert. And now, fast forward to 2008, June 7th, 2008, he passes away. I get asked, this now adult who was a little boy starstruck and writing him letters, I'm asked to stand up and deliver the eulogy. Not there were several, but to deliver a eulogy at his funeral. It's an amazing process of how life works. You never know where the journey's going to take you, but to try to reach out to him when you're just a kid, and then 50 some odd years later, you're standing up and trying to tell his story.
Yeah.
I think the greatest wordsmith there ever was in our industry, maybe co-wordsmith with Jack Whitaker, and to try to cobble together a few cogent thoughts about this great man and what he meant to America. And it was powerful. It's powerful stuff, man. The power of a dream. That was a boyhood dream. Doesn't matter. Doesn't stop. The dreams don't stop. But that's one of the real honors of my life, is being able to get to know all of those men that I mentioned. Sadly, they're all gone now. You know, mentors are a big thing for me. You just, life goes on. Next thing you know, you're 65 years old, and I miss having them, in my life. I miss them. I think about them all the time.
One thing, and I'm not trying to embarrass Jim, but last December, Chris Collinsworth, at a function that we were all at in New York, said, one of the things he gets tired is people asking him, is Jim Nantz really that nice? And then I got up a little bit later and said, Chris, I can tell you he's nicer. And he is. But what I'm going to say, in all of our businesses, once you get off the merry-go-round, the next person comes up. And then everybody's over to that person. Jim Nantz, as always, the Jack Whitakers, the Jim McKays, the Pat Summeralls, on and on and on. Jim Nantz always made sure that when he got to their town, to have lunch, to have dinner. Many a time we met Jack Whitaker at the famed Marion Golf Club to have lunch and dinner with him. And, he's a guy that we all grew up listening to and watching. I just saw the other day, 1998, Shell Wonderful World of Golf at Wingfoot, battle between Davis Love III and Justin Leonard, who played in the last group in 97 with the Rainbow when Davis won the PGA Championship. It was Peter Alliss and Jack Whitaker doing it. And it was wonderful to see those two great men. But that's one thing that Jim has never forgotten, who was important in his life, that always made sure that they felt important at the age of 85 and 90 and on and on and on. And that's one thing that I felt like I've learned from Jim over the years that I'm still try to remember, because people get forgotten about. And that's one of the great traits that the great man has, is making sure that certain people aren't forgotten about, and he's great at doing that, Coach.
Well, you're in Nashville, so you've been probably following the story of Vandy.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Yeah, Coach Lee is doing a heck of a job.
So my good friend Jerry Keel is kind of one of those guys you talked about, a guy that, had to retire at Minnesota because of his health. He was working with me, became the interim head coach when I stepped away, and we went on to New Mexico State, and now him and a guy by the name of Tim Becker there. And I'm coming to Nashville on Thursday because I want to come and see him. I want to be a part of the game. They're playing South Carolina, and so it's one of those things that just everything he ever goes and touches, which Coach Lee is doing a great job himself, for him to have the strength and the kind of attitude to bring somebody in because he just wanted to get better. But yeah, there's nothing like, never forget the people that helped you get to where you were at. That were
I'm so happy to hear.
mentors.
I didn't realize that about Jerry. He's poor guy has been through a lot. He really has with his health. But I can tell you, here in Nashville, the Vanderbilt fever is a real thing. Now, go back about 3 weeks ago, I took my son, Jameson, who's in the third grade, to go see the middle school championship game that was held at Vandy. And I had never been in the football stadium before. I'm always gone on weekends, so I don't get to see these games. But now I'm in the stadium. I'd seen it a million times on TV. I'm looking around. It's under a lot of construction. It's kind of hard getting in and out. And I sat there thinking, wow, they've got Alabama coming in here, and Alabama's going to be playing in this stadium in 4 days. I'm just kind of in awe of it. What will that look like? What will that be like? How will they handle the traffic? There's very few entryways because of this expansion project. And I thought, I'm so glad I saw it. I hope they don't get slaughtered. Of course, what do? They beat Alabama. And just a week or so ago, Texas came, and I had a lot of Texas people I know who came into town. I had a chance to visit with, and they gave them a good go. This coach is the head coach is really impressive. Now, I don't really know him that well. My son is, I mentioned in the third grade, he's in the same class as the coach's daughter. And what's kind of interesting, I don't know how when they construct these classes, let's put this kid in that class because there's 4 classes per grade. So he's in a class. Here he's got a daddy who calls football games. And he's sitting right next to Chuck Lee's daughter. Another girl right over somewhere in that vicinity in that same classroom is Brian Callahan's daughter. So you got the daughters of the 2 head coaches in town of the Titans and Vanderbilt and my son. I said, son, you ought to talk to him a little bit about football because he's a football nut. But it's just really cool. This small community here. It's really close knit, and Vanderbilt. To be able to compete in the SEC, Coach, you know it.
Yeah.
It's tough, and they haven't won for years, but man, they are competitive. They are hyper competitive, and I know South Carolina is pretty decent. I watched the A&M game the other day. That would be a good one. You'll have a good time here. I promise you that.
Well, you always go to learn. One of the things I've done in the last 2 or 3 years, I was at Texas and then at Baylor for the spring. And, it's not only do you go and give whatever advice you can to help them get better, but I've been like a sponge. I've learned so much. I've learned so much about the game. I went from an office that had 35, 40 in it to 130 some at Texas. And you go and, both Sark, great recruiter, things you learned about the NIL and the portal. And then I learned about how to beat protections with Coach Aranda at Baylor. As a head coach, people don't understand. I never got an opportunity, to go out and do stuff that would make me better as much as your assistants would go do it, but I never got a chance to. So it's been great, and get a chance to stand on the sidelines Saturday and see watch Clark work and then watch all those guys work and know that they're doing something they haven't done in a long time. That's why, to be honest with you, Jim, wanted to do this with Lance. Him and I had become good friends. We'd always talked about, we could sit for hours down at Colonial and listen to Lance tell stories, and we talked about different things. And, probably half the conversation, your name always comes up in. So it was a really easy pick, and I'm glad that you said yes to have you on this podcast, because to be honest with you, it's I feel like I can't say brother, but I feel like I know you just as well because he's been telling you. And I'm going to tell you, one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life is going then when we were playing in the coaches classic and going after a round and coming up to your house and hitting the replica of the number 7, the hole 7, and hitting the ball down at the deal going, hey, look, number 1, I'm at Jim Nance's house hitting this little rubber ball down at 7, hoping I get a hold of one so I can talk about it the rest of my life.
Great. I remember it so vividly. You had your TCU contingent with you, and had just loved the visit with you. And Coach, I even actually one time was right there, either at your home or next door.
Yeah, at the Singales.
That's it. And your home's beautiful. You still live there, right?
Correct.
Oh man. So yeah, no, but I remember seeing so many times on a Friday night at Colonial coming into Del Frisco's, and you and Kelsey are sitting there sipping on one of those Del desserts. That incredible concoction that it can be lethal. It was, but I'm big fan. And Lance would come out on the road and say, well, I said, what'd you do this week? And I said, well, I had lunch on Tuesday with Coach Patterson. What a career though. It's interesting what I just heard out of that is how big it's gotten, how it's swelled to so many people now that are involved in a football program, the big business of it all. I'm not sure, to be honest, I'm in love with all this. I'm really not. Um, the NIL thing and the transfer portal, it's a combo that can lead to a lot of, I think, bad judgment. Not always. I'm not saying it's corrupt, but it can lead in a lot of places to some really not good things. And it's tough on the coaches today. It really is, to maintain a roster and build a team, build a player, grow with that player through the course of 4 or 5 years. So all I know is that when you were at TCU, it was amazing what you achieved. I mean, you brought them back, put them on the map, back to
Thanks.
like the 1930s. It was amazing what you did, the Rose Bowl and all that. No one saw that coming. They really didn't. No one saw all of a sudden that you were going to build an empire there, TCU. So it was fun to be able to watch it from afar and have the link with Lance and you and see it all unfold.
Well, I didn't have much time for golf because of you and Lance. I didn't have an appreciation for how, because you don't, I'd play it 4 or 5 times a year. That's all I'd have time to do it. And now, not only to you guys kind of got me invested, now I'm actually trying to, I'm getting to where I play golf until I find another purpose every day that ends in Y.
I love
so
it.
I've gotten better, but it's, I would not say that I have a perfect golf swing, Jim. So I'm just trying to maneuver myself around the course, do what I do. But I got down to a 5. But you know what I learned about playing golf with a 5? You can't play for very many people. So I've had to learn how to manage my handicap. I'm about back up to like a 7, 8. Where you can, some of these guys, some of these older guys, they can't drive very well, but they know how to arrive. This chipping and putting stuff, I mean, they get after you pretty good.
Lance was asking me about my week. I do have a round of golf, which I've got to go prepare for. I'm going down to Chattanooga to play the honors on Thursday.
Oh, that's awesome.
Playing with 3 really good players. It's one of the things in my life I've tried to snuff out for years is people think I can play. I can't play. Can't play a lick because of my ties at the University of Houston and rooming with future PGA Tour players and stars. And my game, people think I'm just, haven't played in a month. I'm going to walk out and shoot 75 and feel like I should have shot 68. It doesn't happen. I mean, I don't shoot 75. I don't shoot a lot of days. I don't shoot 85. And it's just getting worse and worse. And I'm playing a semi-important round of golf on Thursday with a great group of guys who are all 1s and 2s. Oh, and I keep saying, oh, I can't. Oh, stop, Jim. You're being humble. No, I am really not being humble. I'm telling you the truth. I can't play. So I've got to find a golf swing. That's one thing somewhere this week. I got to go out and rent a golf swing for a day. Probably be the last important round of the year for me in the calendar 24, which I've had some epic rounds this year. Places to play, that is. Not great numbers by me. But I love that you're into it, Gary. I think that's great. And the other thing is that Lance is into it now. Lance is, he's been playing when he more than he did, and he's playing with Melissa, so that's very cool.
Well, let's talk about that. People think you're a great golfer because you just happen to room with a couple guys and really 3 guys who had, I guess, moderate success on the PGA Tour, and Blaine McAllister, John Horn, and a guy I'm not for sure whatever happened to him, Fred Couples.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him.
Tell us about.
I don't remember his post-college career at all.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him. I know what happened to Blaine and John. John went back to Plainview and became a head pro for many years at his country club in Plainview, Texas. Blaine had great success from Fort Stockton, Texas, on the PGA Tour and Champions Tour. So tell us about those days in Houston. I know a lot of people have heard about it, but tell us about being there under the legendary coach Dave Williams, and that you were a part of that program, and that he really thought a lot of you and wanted you to be a part of that program in whatever role that you could make yourself a part of that program.
Well, when you're 18 and Dave Williams invites you to be on the golf team, you are led to believe that he has a lot of confidence in you to be a good player. The program at that point was like the UCLA basketball program under John Wooden in the 60s. I don't know if you know this, Gary, but our coach won 16 national championships in 30 years. He's been gone now for a quarter century, but amazing leader of young men. And I got invited after a tryout to be on the golf team. And I could play, at that point, I could play decently, but I wasn't at the level of these other guys. Bottom line is, through maturity and time, you realize that the coach had a useful purpose for me. He saw a goal-minded individual who knew, because I told him straight up that my goal was to go, if I was on the golf team, I still was going to be obsessing about trying to one day figure out how to get to CBS. I wanted to be a broadcaster. I wanted to be one of those voices we mentioned. And what did he do? He put me in the room with his 3 recruits, his 3 scholarship players coming in. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's a better than 75% chance that John Horn, you mentioned, is going to be hearing this pod. John is now out of the golf business, and he's a farmer. And he rides on his tractor, working the fields during the day, and listens to podcasts. So I want to give my boy a big shout out. He played on the tour for 2 years, by the way, John did. Just an exceptional player when we were in college, and a great friend, wonderful man. And then Blaine won 5 times on the tour. And Freddie, of course, went on and made it all the way to the World Golf Hall of Fame. One of the most beloved players in the game in our time. But my role really was to be a role model. Again, I didn't know it when I was 18, 19, 20, 21. I was always like, coach thinks I'm good enough to play in the starting 5. But what I was doing every day was getting up, getting showered, getting dressed nicely, going to class, being on time, coming back to my room, doing homework. There was no hijinks here. There is no story to uncover here of some wild, crazy thing that we did. We didn't even drink. I never drank. I never had a drink in college. Okay. I know I'm going to sound like a nerd, but I'm proud of that, actually. And we were just good kids. We were all determined to try to figure out how to make it to what was inside of our heart, that dream that had been fostering and had been nurtured by a lot of people, family and other people that believed in us, whatever that is that we wanted to do. Win the Masters. Freddie did it. Work for CBS. I'm blessed to have seen that dream come true. But for 4 years, we were a band of brothers that loved our time and fed off of the positive energy of one another. There was no snipey, snarky, like today, a lot of humor is putting people down. And I understand that's a lot of comedy is built on sarcasm and things like that. But we were so positive. Yeah, maybe we had a few jokes about one another, but most of the time it's like building each other up. You're going to work for CBS one day. Yeah, and you're going to win the Masters. And we had a great time. I mean, you look at it now, it's so long ago, and to see that all of us got to do what we wanted to do. I don't know what the word for it is, but when people are emitting positive energy, you're in that energy field of theirs. They wear it. It's around you. And you take that. You can't see it, you can't feel it, but you know it's there. You kind of do feel it. You're uplifted by it. And that was my career in college. I was around a bunch of believers, kids that were good, faith-based, driven, and I siphoned off of them. I think they siphoned off of me, and we all went for what we wanted to do. We went for it.
Jim, I want to ask you, I got to see it. I experienced it. One of the great moments at the Masters when Freddie received the green jacket. You asked him down in Butler cabin about you guys used to sit around the dorm and practice that moment. And I'll never forget Freddie kind of turning away and putting his hand up to his face that he was about to start crying. And I know the emotion that you had there. I know that story's been told a lot, but in a short time, what did that mean to you? And I know if you could speak on Freddie's behalf, what that meant as a couple of 18, 19-year-old guys sitting around Taub Hall down at the University of Houston practicing one day to be in Butler Cabin and having you look to the chairman and say, "It's that time, Mr. Chairman, to
Well,
give
you had to
Freddie the
say that.
green jacket."
Yeah. First off, Lance, I'm appreciative that you know my personal history, and I'm not surprised. I know yours.
Are you
All that
sure?
stuff, by the way, Gary, he was talking about earlier about I remember people I go into towns. He's the best, really. Lance is a great friend who treasures his friendships, and he works his friendships. He doesn't forget people. He keeps people involved. So always been in awe of that. Now, and April the 12th, 1992, Freddie won the green jacket, and I had the honor of sitting across from him. And yes, it had been fermenting for quite a while when we were in the dorms. I know through time it probably sounds like we did this every day. We probably did it a couple of times over the course of the years, but we practiced the green jacket ceremony. I was talking about hijinks and what kind of crazy things were you guys doing? Drinking kegs? No, I told you we didn't drink. No, we didn't do anything. We were into things that were going to lead to something that was in our heart, chasing something. And the idea of Freddie winning the Masters felt very real to me. And he made me feel that one day broadcasting the Masters for CBS was plausible. It can happen. And the odds are long for both of those to happen. And I really realize it now, the older I get, that how in the world did CBS entrust me at the age of 26 to do the things that I was doing on national television? It's crazy. And I'm 65 now. I don't know what they were thinking. But that was something that we did play act a few times. I sat there masquerading like I was some big shot CBS announcer in Butler Cabin. He was sitting across from me playing the role of a Masters champion. And to think that you can go from that and then fast forward 15 years later, and now you're actually playing out that scene again, but the world is watching. It was heavy stuff, Coach. I've got to tell you, it was heavy. I did not know that I could get through it. Now, and I think Fred felt vulnerable too. I mean, I was very vulnerable. He was. And Lance said it. He couldn't even look at me. He turned his head away, shielded his eyes. We were just trying to get through it. And I was a little panicky. I'm not going to kid you. I can remember when Fred was playing the 17th hole, he had separated himself enough from Raymond Floyd. Ben Wright said something to me. Jim Nance, you're down there in Butler Cabin. You and Freddie have known each other for quite a while. Did you ever see this day coming? And I just garbled the answer on the air. It was a bunch of start stops and just the run-on sentences, and I was a mess. I'm not on camera, but I didn't lend a whole lot except nervous energy. And when he walked off 17, I thought, hey, you got to get a grip, man. This is actually happening. This is going to actually happen. And this is going to be one of the biggest moments of your career and life. You've got to summon the strength to be able to get through this. You got a job to do. You got to be a professional about this now. It's not all about us and our story. It's about someone won the Masters. So we conducted a pretty standard stock interview going through the important questions. And I thought, man, I'm going to regret it forever if I don't say something on a personal aside. So my last question, I knew if I can get the words out, I'm going to say it. I said, I think back to our days in college. I think of Paul Marchand. Fred says he's on the grounds. John Horn, Blaine McAllister. We all said, someday you're going to be wearing the green jacket. And they said that. Fred can have run-on sentences himself, and he was choking. He didn't want to go there. Lance has seen when the train comes off the track emotionally for Fred. He starts crying. He can't stop. And I'm like that too. Anyway, he got through it. I'm still in a state of shock. I turned to Jack Stevens and said, Chairman, it's that time. Which it's Lance's favorite line, become an inside joke. It's that time. And he says, Ian, Woozy, would you please? And Woozy put on the green jacket. And I'm still sitting there. I should have stood up. And Fred's like hovering over me, and I said, "Yeah, it's a perfect fit." Well, Fred thought I was talking about the jacket. It looked like they gave him Woozy's jacket. Came just below the sleeve, came just below the elbow. And I said, Fred Couples and Masters champion. I was trying to set up. That's the perfect fit. And Lance, you know what happened after that? I signed off, and the two of us kind of just fell into an embrace, crying. Can't believe that this has actually happened. We're off camera now, but it was recorded. And that's still, I have to say, the greatest single moment of my career to be able to share that with Fred.
You know, that's where you remember things. You know, he's talking about a 26-year-old young man. One of my, you know, there's a lot of great calls at the Masters. Jim's been a part of a lot of them. You know, people know the Vern Lundquist calls and the Ben Wrights and the Pat Summerall's calls. But to me, one of the famous calls that kind of gets forgotten about as a 26-year-old young man sitting in the 16th tower, Jack Nicklaus at the age of 46 is about to win his sixth green jacket. I have always said it's the greatest event I was ever a part of, even though I didn't produce it. The legendary Frank Chikinian did and directed it. But this 26-year-old, first time at the Masters, Jim Nantz, Jack Nicklaus almost makes a hole-in-one at 16. He taps in, walks to the 17th tee, and Jim has one of the great calls of, make no doubt about it, the bear has come out of hibernation. And I think it's, and he also asked Tom Weiskopf, one of the great stories, a legendary Hall of Fame golfer who was in Butler Cabin with Brent Musburger. When Jack was on the 16th tee, he said, Tom, what do you think the bear is thinking right now? And Tom had one of the great comebacks. If I knew that, Jim, I would have won 3 green jackets. And I always bring it up to people. No, one of the great Masters call is as a 26-year-old Jim Nantz, the bear has come out of hibernation. With that, Jim, as we have a few moments left, real quickly, what is, in your mind, in all your sports, what would you consider your greatest call?
Oh, boy. You know, that's such a big thing in today's world because of social media. People can clip off an 8-second call, post it, gets a lot of reaction. When I first came into the business, no one really talked about, you know, the emphasis of a call. I was all in it for the 3-hour broadcast and living each play and doing it accurately and having the proper inflections, excitement, whatever. But it is a big thing now. Like Pat Summerall, Pat wasn't really around to see the social media mania of today. If you ask Pat Summerall what was his best call, you know, nobody knew him better than Lance. I don't know what it would be. There it is. There's your champion, probably. But, you know, like no one was into that. Dick Enberg, no one was into that. They're into it now. So that's a tough one. I think the two Tiger bookends in 97 and 2019. 97 calling it a win for the ages. I labored over that. I know it's just a few words, but on that Saturday night, we all knew, the world knew he was going to win the next day. He had massive lead. And I also realized that clip of him putting out on 18, however far it would be played back forever. In 2500, when they come on the air with the Masters broadcast and they have that montage piece with some historic piece, that's going to be in there. Tiger in 97 is going to be in it. And by the way, dragged with it is, there it is. A win for the ages. Almost forgot the line there for a second. So I thought about it that night. Summerall, McKay, Whitaker, Schenkel, Enberg, they're all alive. As sat at my rental house, I figuratively felt them peering over my shoulder. What are you going to do tomorrow? How are you going to handle that? They all had become a very big part of my life, friends and mentors. And I knew I had to be on it. And I just sat there, eventually thought, what will play well for years is to be able to say something about ages. It'll last forever. The win was so historic. So that one I'm proud of, just like the return to glory, which was inflected, I think, in a way that reflected that he had been through quite a journey to get back to winning that again when no one thought he would ever win it again. And his kids are standing there off the 18th green, and it was kind of soulful. That's what I would say. Just touched the soul. And I didn't even know I was going to say it. I don't even know how it came out, how it left the lips. So those would be two. That the one that I'm really thrilled about. I'm thrilled to don't fall in love with your work, Lance. You know that old saying. But you never know when this is going to land in your lap. Gary, a couple of weeks ago, we had a Hail Mary in Washington.
I saw it.
And I just happened to be the guy that was in the building, and Jaden Daniels somehow heaved it 65 yards in the air, and it bounced off of a swarm of players into the arms of Noah Brown, and chaos ensued. You can't prepare. You don't have that in your head how you're going to call it. So you get lost in it. And I was happy with the way that came together as a team, the way Mike Arnold cut around it. What Tony, what his role in it. It was that meant a lot. So,
Jim, as we you talked about the University of Houston, you talked about being there as a student, obviously everyone who goes to a university, if you really love the university like you do, University of Houston, you always have great memories. Jim, led by Jim, and then Blaine and Freddie, they had a thing called the Three Amigos that gave back to the university and also gave back to causes that they three had. And obviously, Jimmy, now down in the city of Houston, you have maybe one of the biggest projects of your life, the Jim Nance Center at Methodist Hospital down in Houston, trying to come up with a cure for this horrible disease that your dad was stricken with and lived with for many years. I was fortunate enough to get to know his dad before the illness and then a little bit during the illness, and his mom, obviously. They were like parents to me, Gary. But Jim, talk us about the Nance Center. And
yeah, well, thank you. I'll make it brief, even though I'm very proud of it. And I don't want to, well, I'll just say this. It's called the Nance National Alzheimer's Center. It's named for my father. And wonderful things are happening in the world right now in research. The last couple of years have been amazing. Prolific things are coming out of the research space, which we've collaborated with and been asked to be a part of these important projects. And some really dynamic and groundbreaking trials that have been approved. Most recently, two drugs called lecanemab and donanemab have both been approved. It's led to it's been a gateway. They've been a gateway to opening up other things. I mean, I'm really for a disease that had nothing but darkness behind it, no positivity, never able to crack the code. We got a foot in the door now, and I really do believe with each passing day, year, we're starting to see how we're going to be able to handle this better as a world, because it does affect so many people and those that are in the caregiving side of it as well. How many lives are destroyed through Alzheimer's in this country? We have 5 to 6 million people right now in this country that have it, but it's not 5 or 6 million people that it touches. It's all the surrounding family members. It's 20 million people, let's say. So we have to do something. I'd had to roll up my sleeves and get involved. Melissa Miller, who has run my world, she's a Fort Worth girl. She is amazing how she helps the Nance Center every day. Every single day, there are things going back and forth, trying to raise awareness, raise money. And I'm really proud of that became a central focus for me. I felt so blessed after I got the dream job. What did I do to deserve this? I got to do something more with the platform than just running around on CBS's nickel, flying around first class, eating expensive dinners with Lance Barrow. I've got to do something more I need to, I need to find something. And I wrote this book about my dad, and it really kind of galvanized my view of the world. And I wanted to be a spokesman to help lead to some wonderful breakthroughs. And it's ongoing, as they say. But if there are people out there listening that know this story all too well, hopefully they know. If they don't know, there are some really positive things that are coming, that are on the market now for Alzheimer's treatments, research. It's all getting in a good spot.
Well, I was fortunate enough, blessed enough, Joe Castiglio, the outstanding athletic director at the University of Oklahoma, we went down to Houston when Jim called his last Final Four. And on Monday, we got to go to the Nance Alzheimer's Center to see what they're doing, to hear the doctors talk about what they're doing. And obviously, the basketball coaches and the committee had given money to the center to help cure this disease. And I've seen it. This is not something that he put his name up on the wall and not doing anything. Jim Nance, he mentioned Melissa Miller, and a lot of other people are really dedicated. His sister Nancy are very dedicated to this Jim Nance Center, Alzheimer's Center down in Houston. If you see this podcast and you take anything away from it, if you need help, contact that center and see where they can take you.
NanceFriends.org. NanceFriends.org. It's not my name on there. It's my dad's name. Thank you, Lance.
That's way cool. Judge, a lot of people buy what they give back, because we're all so fortunate. And to know that you want to give and make things better, I mean, I know it's your dad, but I also know that you're helping a lot more people than just your dad. So thank you.
And he has. I mean, we had a colleague at CBS Golf, Peter Oosterhouse, a legendary golfer from England who was our announcer for years, had the disease, and Jim was right there with Peter and Ruthie, his wife, and his family, and gave him a few more years than he probably would have had if it wasn't for the Nance Center down in Houston. So, Jimmy, thank you. Real quickly, I would be remiss, one of our producers and the guy who came up with this podcast thought with Gary and myself, J.W. Wilson, who played football for Gary down at TCU, was asking me about your wine, The Calling, and he said he's had it. He's had it, and he said it's really good. You know how much I know about wine, and Gary was raving about it too. I didn't know Gary was a wine guy. But a couple of weeks ago in New York, you guys were honored, and you had a chance to speak to the world of the wine people, as I guess they call them. Tell us about that real quickly before we end.
Thank you, JW. Thank you, man. We've had a brand now for quite a while. We debuted, by the way, at Del Frisco's in Fort Worth on May 23rd, 2012. It's the first public outing for The Calling. So we're 12 years plus. It's growing a little bit by the year. I mean, a lot, actually. It's been a wonderful project. We're in 5,000 restaurants across the country. And I had the honor of speaking at the New York Wine Experience in late October before this gathering. They say it's the biggest gathering of wine aficionados, wine makers in the world. It's called the Grand Pour, the Grand Tasting. And I was asked to speak. A pretty weighty assignment, I have to admit. Standing in front of a bunch of people that, some are third and fourth generation winemakers, from Italy and France and all this. But I gave them my best 15 minutes to talk about The Calling and what we're trying to do. And it's become such a fun thing in my life. I'm at a point, you both need to tell me if I'm speaking your language here. When you get to 60-ish, I don't know that you're there yet, Gary, but
you and I are the same age.
We are the same age. Well,
I'll be 65 in February. So.
When you get here, and I dial it back maybe 5 years ago, you make a determination that what are you going to do with your time? And I boil it down to two things. If I'm going to take it on, is it going to be fun? And am I doing it with people I want to be with? And that's the litmus test for me. Now, I don't want to do things I don't want to do anymore. I've run, chased, done enough things, and a lot of them are great causes. A lot of them are, let's call it a speaking engagement somewhere where it's a lot of travel to go somewhere to speak before a group. Is it going to be fun? Is it with people that I want to be with? It's not about money at that point. These decisions are about what makes you happy now, making the maximum making the most out of the time that you have. So that's the wine part falls into that category. It's fun. It's highly rewarding, but it's fun. And I'm doing it with people that I want to spend time with. So thank you for that.
Well, as we close, there's 8,000 other questions Gary and I wanted to ask you.
We talked about them for 15 minutes.
I wanted to ask you about being influenced by Billy Packer and, Bill Raftery and Ken Venturi and President Bush and Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, who, when Jim Nantz tells you they're friends, they're more than friends. They're mentors to him. I saw it firsthand. I wanted to ask you about that. There's a lot of things, I probably know you better than most, that I wanted to ask you that I might know or maybe never knew about, but I wanted to ask you. Gary had a few questions, but Melissa Miller was telling me you have a pretty tight schedule today, and we don't want to get her upset because she's the best at what she does, and Fort Worth misses her, but, she's doing a great thing. She has a wonderful, loving family, and every once in a while I get to run into her mom and dad here in Fort Worth. But Gary, as we say goodbye to the great man, I want to tell you, to have him come on this podcast, do you imagine? I mean, just imagine how many podcasts that he could do every day. Yeah. He could spend 24 hours, 7 days a week doing podcasts. He was nice enough to say thank you, and yes, I would do it, for asking him to do our first ever podcast. That shows what kind of friend he is, not only to you, yeah, Gary, but to me. And Jimmy, I can't thank you enough. It's almost a little emotional to me to be able to do this. I said this a couple weeks ago. You were really the one who kind of made me think that I could do this, because you had a conversation with our chairman at CBS about a year or so ago about maybe get Lance to do something on golf and this and that. And Jim said, you could do that. Lance could do this. And I never thought. I'm more of a guy behind the camera than in front. And it took me a long time to finally say, okay. And then I get to sit here next to a great friend in Gary Patterson, and to now to be able to say, thank you for being on our first ever podcast. Who knows where it goes from here? It might be one of these ones we just go to black and never have another one, because how can we get any better than this?
I don't know if we can get any better, but I would say this, Jim. Cheers to you and Lance. I mean, the relationship, what you did, all the things you gave to the game, not only golf, but the football and the people. That's what I'm saying. I'm more sitting here as a fan, because he's saying, well, this story has been told many times before. Well, it's the first time I've heard it, because, I wasn't for 42 years. I wasn't in the golf world. I was working 20 hours a day, doing 7 days a week, trying to make a difference in the football world. So I would tell you, I know my life's better because I met you, and I know my life's better because I met Lance. And, it's those things don't change. So thank you very much, and cheers to you.
I'm honored, Coach. Thank you. And Lance, appreciate you. Those questions you wanted to get to, you know what that happens to those? They're in part two. The interview, part two.
Part two. Part two.
Well, from Taylor Swift to everything else, it's been a blast, guys. And before I fall out of my chair, thank you for having me on here. You're great friends. It means a lot. Thank you.
Same here, Jimmy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, guys. Stay in touch, guys.